My name is Steve Sarsfield. I work for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. I work in the software division for the Vertica team. What I want to talk about today is preparing your organization to derive insight from the Internet of Things. You know, I think what we saw with our last case study is that a lot of companies have these legacy technologies that are out there. And so we have this whole concept of, you know, these new data sources coming in. We're trying to ingest it. We're trying to run analytics around it. And there are new strategies, like you just saw, for ingesting that and using that within your organization. So, you know, Vertica is one piece of that. But we also embrace open source and embrace some of the things that are out there that you can use for very inexpensive, very inexpensively. So things like Spark, Hadoop, HDFS, all of the implementations of Hadoop can be used, and you can leverage that and really save a lot of costs. So that's really what I want to talk about here. Let's see, is this thing working? Nope. All right, let me go to the keyboard. Driving customer insight. I think, you know, there are really three reasons why we think about leveraging the Internet of Things and the data that's in the Internet of Things. And it's not up on this slide. It's actually, how can we as a company drive more revenue from the data that we have for the Internet of Things? How can we be more efficient in what we do day to day? And we might also have to do some regulatory things. So how can we comply with the laws that you know, we have to comply with in the industry? So, you know, I think companies are looking for revenue, efficiency, compliance. They're trying to derive data from that. There are other things that we are doing too, like I know we have some customers who are doing like genetic research. So they're trying to change the human condition. We have customers that are looking at wildlife and endangered species, right? And they're tracking the movements of those endangered species. So analytics can be used for a really wide range of things. But for most of us, it's revenue, efficiency, and compliance, right? So those things are really, you know, it comes down when you sort of the rubber hits the road. For preventative maintenance, you know, we want to make sure that if we're an air conditioning manufacturer like Trane, Trane actually monitors the condition of the air conditioners as they sit on the roofs. And if it starts to overheat or if conditions warrant, they might send a technician out to fix an air conditioner, so predictive maintenance. Security analytics is really big. And actually, that's kind of a tough problem because what you want to know when you're analyzing all your web servers and app servers and things like that is what's happening right now. You know, what am I under attack right now? But I might also want to know 3 years worth of data. What can I compare what's happening right now to 3 years ago when a similar incident happened? And what did I do and what was the action we took 3 years ago? So those two problems are unique. When we're doing security analytics. Healthcare records now, you know, companies like Sunto are using analytics. Behind the scenes, they actually have Vertica, and they're doing analytics for monitoring your own health and keeping track of that. So Sunto in Finland is a great healthcare. But we're doing other things around genetic research, and if I have time, I'll share that with you. Customer support. We want to make sure that our customers are happy. We can drive more revenue. So these are really the things that are driving demand for us. It's driving us into implementing these types of products, or we are being driven into these types of actions by, you know, our drive to make more money, be more efficient, and potentially comply, right? But, you know, there are challenges around this. Of course, when you bring in the Internet of Data, of course, it can be potentially much more data. One of our customers actually is ingesting up to 60 terabytes per hour into Vertica. So that's the kind of data that you can achieve. It's a really big customer. You may have heard, well, it's Facebook. They're ingesting a ton of data, and they're doing analysis of their ad campaigns behind the scenes. So we're handling more data. That data is coming in. At the same time, we have to deliver really fast analytics. You know, our customers, the business users that use our analytical platforms, they're expecting it fast. And so we have to achieve that if we can. Cost of license is a huge issue, right? The stats say that year over year, our IT budgets are growing by about 4% year over year, but our data volumes may be growing 50, 60, 100% year over year. So how do we handle that? It's really with open source and some of the new business models that some of the newer companies have out on the marketplace, using the cloud to help us save money and so on. If you have legacy technologies within your company, tuning costs can be a big cost for you. So I may have to go in and tune Oracle over and over again, and I hope there's no Oracle people in the room, but I may have to go and tune that over and over, create new materialized views, new indices, and that becomes a problem, spending lots of money on that. And then finally, the skills to leverage the new tools. So we can bring in open source tools, but do we need to know MapReduce, or do we need to know how to use those tools in order to achieve that? So these are the challenges that we face. I'm sure there are more than this, but these are the things we're thinking about when we develop our platform for data innovation. So I have one slide on Vertica. Vertica is a columnar store database. It allows you to scale to massive scale. Again, we have our biggest customer, or the one that challenged us the most, is Facebook with the 60 terabytes an hour, and they have thousands of users doing analysis against their Vertica database. So really big scale, really understand it. For the business user, this is just a database. So they can run their SQL queries, they can use MicroStrategy or Tableau or anything they want in front of that click. So it's a database, but behind the scenes, what's happening is we're storing data in columns rather than rows. And because we're storing data in columns rather than rows, when you ask a question, the database can get right to the answer of the question. So picture, I want a stock quote by date. Well, there's a column of stocks and a column of date, and I just have to access that data. I don't have to scan through the entire database in order to get that answer. And then, because we're storing in columns rather than rows, we can really compress the data down quite a lot. So think about a column of dates and a column of stock quotes. That compresses down quite a bit. And then when we're accessing that data on disk, it's much faster. Okay, so that's the way we're able to kind of do some tricks behind the scenes in order to make our analytics a lot faster than the standard one that's out there. So to the end user, it's advanced analytics. It's open ANSI SQL. We've added recently in-database machine learning capabilities. So your in-database things like k-means, logistic regression, linear regression, those types of things are as part of the database. And then you can take that and you can also install that in the cloud, on-premise, or on Hadoop. So if you have any of those technologies, it's helpful. Think about it. If you had a system where you had a database on-premise, and then at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, you needed to boost that up temporarily and run stuff on the cloud, that's really a great use case for Vertica on the cloud in conjunction with Vertica on-premise. So some of the things we think about in terms of the analytics that you run actually are the complexity of the analytics. So some of the challenges that you have around some of the open source solutions that are out on the market, and some of the less mature ones are, when you think about the Internet of Things, you're generally thinking about a sensor, and it's out there in the world. It's sending you data over and over again. Sometimes the sensor doesn't send you data. It stops for an hour. And then what do you do, right? So we're looking at the types of analysis that you might want to have as far in terms of this. So the sensor sending your data, you want to do time series analysis. You want to do things like event windows and time series joins. So if I want to look at a specific part in time, I want to be able to do that fast. If I want to do joins, I can do that as well with data that may be sitting in my data warehouse and data that's sitting in Hadoop. So the key thing here is to understand, what type of analysis you might want to run, and then also making sure that will run on your system. If you don't have this type of analysis as part of your system, you find yourself kind of doing different things to work around it. You might munge the data. So if you have that sensor out there that's sending you data and suddenly it stops, you might have to kind of munge the data, fake the data a little bit in order to run that analysis. So if you have the right database and the right features in the database, it's very easy to work around that. You might have to make custom code, you might have to copy and move the data, sort of things that are going to cost you time and money in order to achieve analysis. And you're going to have to fill those gaps. And actually, there are quite a lot of these to think about when you're picking your solution. So, even basic SQL queries like customer segmentation queries and channel analysis and net profit and revenue, some of those won't run on some of the newer solutions, some of the less mature solutions out there. So think about that, think about the basics, but then things like geospatial. If you want to do lat and long, that needs to be part of your solution. I think with some of the open source solutions, if you want to have geospatial as part of it, you got to add that on. It has to be a separate product, has to be a separate feature in some cases. Data types is another really important one. So if you have time series data, one of your data types could be time, right? Time is a data type, and it's not supported by some of the open source solutions, some of the less mature solutions that are on the marketplace. So think about that sort of thing. And again, all the things around analyzing the data like time series gap analysis, sessionization, I can't even say that, statistic functions, in-place joins, and so on. So you have to think about sort of how to fill those gaps if you go with a little bit less mature solution. The legacy solutions actually do pretty well with these types of analysis, but some of the newer solutions that are cheaper don't necessarily do well with that at all. I think you can think also about the types of analysis that you may do even within your own single application. A couple of examples I'd like to point out. So let's say you have a weather application. I want to know right now what's happening right now, what the weather is, what the temperature is. But I might want to know also, what's the average temperature for this time of year for my zip code or my area. What's the high and low? What's the average temperature? What's the lowest and highest of all times? Well, the first example there is that's a fast-running short query. So a very short query that you have to run. And the middle part there, that is a really long-running query, right? If I want to go and average 3 years or 5 years worth of data, sensor data, that's a different question. That's a different type of technology that you might have to use in order to answer that question. And then, can we predict the conditions tomorrow, right? Can we have some kind of machine learning algorithm or predictive analytics to predict the conditions tomorrow? That's a separate question together as well. You see that also in security analytics, where I want to know if there's an attack happening right now. I want to take that attack and say, has it happened within the last 3 years? And then also, what can I do to help prevent attacks in security analytics in the future, right? So these are 3 different problems, potentially with 3 different solutions for performing analytics. What we find is that there are sort of different tiers of analytical solutions that you implement. And I think in our last case study, he was hinting at this, that he has different types of analytical solutions doing sort of micro batch queries. And we see this a lot in our customer base. So you want a solution within your stack that has a data warehouse with deep analysis of a lot of data, potentially a lot of users hitting up against that database and performing analytics, many concurrent users. And we think Vertica is a great solution for that, fairly low cost. We charge per terabyte rather than per connected system for this, for that, right? So it's fairly low cost. There's operational analytics. Those are those fast, short-running queries that you might have within your organization. So we think Spark is a pretty good solution for that. Also, VoltDB, by the way, is a pretty good solution in that. So if I have those short, fast-running queries, I want to know what's happening right now. Sometimes these in-memory solutions will help. A data lake is great if you want to take and sort of tier off your data. So maybe I don't want to put all my data in my data warehouse. I occasionally want to query it. A data lake like Hadoop or an HDFS is a really good way to store that data away. It's also pretty good for ETL and data discovery and data science and those types of things. And the way you connect it all up is, you can go to your ETL vendor to connect it all up, or you can use technologies like Kafka. That has become a very popular technology within our user base, so using Kafka to do it. What you also might want to do is, you might want to do some joins between, let's say, the data warehouse and the data lake. So I've got customer information, customer name and address in my data warehouse. I want to join it up against weblog information that's in my data lake. How do I do that? I know we're building solutions around that. We have worked with some of these open source solutions like Cloudera to build a really fast solution around reading org files and Parquet files, which is the common file format that's used for Hadoop. Maybe you want to create machine learning models in Spark and then share that with your data warehouse. So you can create those models and push them down into your data warehouse for bigger sets of data. And we've developed some technologies around that. So having this open architecture is really important in achieving your analytical goals. So we have a couple really good case studies around that. This is your basic Internet of Things case study called Inritsu. Inritsu is a company that makes sensor devices. They sit on cell towers and they gather information about the usage of those cell towers. Phone companies want to provision correctly, right? They want to make sure that the towers are not over-provisioned or under-provisioned. If they're under-provisioned, then people will have drop calls. If they're over-provisioned, they'll pay too much. The companies will pay too much. So Inritsu has these devices that have it out there, they're connected out there through the Internet of Things. Now they tried to take this and they tried to bring it into Oracle. Oracle is one of the legacy technologies that we hear a lot about. You heard that with the last case study, it was similar. And again, it was really they were potentially charging them a lot of money. So when they switched that to Vertica and used some of the open source solutions to solve this issue, they were able to make an ROI within 4 months. In the first year, they saved in licensing costs alone about $3 million. So using some of these new technologies like Vertica and like the open source technologies can really help save you money. The second one, that's a company that obviously should be using the Internet of Things. But you have to think about also, how can you transform your business from a traditional brick and mortar business into something that's data-driven? And we have this company, Hyperight, that has done that. So they have, they are a company that supplies uniforms to doctors and nurses, gas stations, cooks. And Hyperight is very interesting in that they have decided to digitally transform their company and become, more digital. So they have sensors on the trucks that deliver the uniforms to the locations. They have sensors on the washing machines for preventative maintenance. They have sensors on the uniforms themselves, and they can really track and improve the ROI of their services that they provide for their brick and mortar business. So things like that are really important. Transforming your brick and mortar business can be something that you can achieve as well. So I guess really as a final checklist for IoT, make sure that you open up your systems. Don't just use open source, but start to rethink your systems and make sure that they can work with other systems. Make sure that those different analytical workloads that you may have within your organization can be handled. Reconsider your expensive legacy technology. I think we saw in that last case study, that's exactly what they did. They reconsidered the Exadata, and they came up with something really great. Make sure your solutions scale. Consider the differing analytical workloads, like the fast-running queries and the long-running queries, and make sure that you have the skills to leverage these new tools. If you can, also think outside your box, right? How do you change your business? How do you transform it into a business that is data-driven? And I think some of the case studies that I gave you here are proof of that.